My name is Andy Klump, and I'm here to bear witness to the crimes that took place by the federal troops here in Portland, Oregon last night, which was July 24th at approximately 10:30 p.m. My name is Andy Klump. I'm 57 years old. I was born on October 11th, 1962, and I'm a resident of Beaverton, Oregon, 2610 Northwest 147th Place, and I swear everything I am about to say is true, and in fact, I brought a Bible gifted to me by my grandmother. I think it's the St. James version, and I'm going to swear on this Bible, and also on the Book of Mormon. I have a lot of Mormon friends around here, and this was gifted to us by our babysitter, and also by kind of the Klump Bible, which is a book on bicycling. I swear everything I'm about to say is true. I attended the peaceful protests last night. I left here from home at about 8:30. I'm going to look through these pictures to remind me of exactly what happened. But I did go there with the intent of peaceful protesting, and if I saw the protesters become violent or start to damage property or whatnot, I was going to immediately leave. That's not what happened. What happened was we got gassed. And one thing I learned about getting gassed is that when you get home, you want to wash off the gas, because if you don't, you'll wake up in the morning and your eyes are going to be very dry and they're going to hurt a lot. And honestly, I did not expect to learn that in the United States. I would expect that would be something that I would learn in Moscow or Saudi Arabia or North Korea, not precious Portland, Oregon. That's completely unacceptable and has to stop. I swear our protests were peaceful. I left for the protests at about 8:30 p.m. I had thought of a really pithy sign, which I'll show you here, and I wanted to kind of use it for the protests. It turned out to be pretty popular. Lots of people took pictures of it. Some of the media came by and took pictures of it. That was kind of cool. I arrived at the protests maybe 9 o'clock. I actually at first went to the wrong Apple Maps brought me to the wrong place, and so I had to drive past a slightly different way. While I was driving, I took a bunch of pictures outside of the car, and pictures are all more or less like this. You can see there's no damage to any of the properties. These pictures are all taken within a block or two of the Federal Center where the protests took place. There's absolutely no graffiti left. All the looting has been cleaned up, maybe not quite all of it, about 95% of it, I would say. There's still a bit left. Here's a couple blocks away. You can see a bit of graffiti on some of the concrete steps. I would say, I would mention, and this is important to me, that some of the graffiti, I agree with what is written, but most of it, or maybe not most of it, but a lot of it I disagree with, such as, firing all the police officers and so forth. That's absolutely not what I'm about. I love police officers. I've got friends who are police officers. When a police officer drives by, I like to wave. I want police officers to feel like they're welcome and that I appreciate them being around. In any case, I got to the protests and started walking around with my signs. Noticed immediately that it was a hit because people were taking pictures, asked me to stop and take pictures. We're just kind of hanging out. It was kind of boring at first. I posted something to Facebook to the effect that I wish something had happened because I'm kind of bored. Right about then, some chanting began, and then things kind of got going. And for maybe the first hour or so, it was mostly Black Lives Matter, Feds out of Portland, George Floyd, the usual things that I think almost hopefully every true American believes in, which is the proposition that all people should be judged by the content of their character rather than the accident of their parenthood. So that went along for maybe an hour and a half or so, and then I positioned myself on top of one of the barricades that's been put up as a result of 9/11 in front of the federal courthouse, and I was on top of one of those barricades, which may be 3 feet high and are meant to really just to keep out cars from crashing into the building, I suspect. And suddenly, off in the distance, I can hear a drummer, two drummers, like fife drummers, really good sounding to me drummers, and everybody starts chanting, "Moms, moms, moms, moms," and I looked down to the let me see, kind of to the north of where I was, which was Madison, and in come marching a bunch of hundreds of strong, beautiful, powerful women, moms. Dressed in yellow, carrying signs that said things like, "We will protect you." And that was beautiful. That was really beautiful. We were just there exercising our First Amendment rights, right? We're peacefully protesting. Before I left, I was wondering if there was a curfew. I assumed there was, and what time it would end, because I was planning on probably just leaving when the curfew went into effect. But in fact, I could find no evidence of a curfew, and there, in fact, I don't believe there was a curfew. I don't think we violated a curfew, because we can't violate a curfew if there's no curfew that's been communicated. I know there was a curfew a couple nights ago, but last night there seemed to be no communication by anybody, either in the media or at the event, that there was a curfew. So I was, chanting along with everybody else, changing positions numerous times. With me, I was, of course, wearing my mask, and my USA hat, because I'm a proud American. And what I was doing last night, I believe, was one of the duties I have as an American to protest against tyranny. Tyranny that I personally witnessed within a couple hours of when those moms marched in. I was wandering around, taking pictures from different views. And at one point I noticed a camera on top of the, I think that the camera was actually on the Multnomah Justice Center, not the U.S. District Courthouse. But the camera was kind of, it looked like it was panning back and forth maybe, but it was clearly drawing the attention of people in the crowd who had, red and blue lasers, and were pointing the lasers up at the camera, which they would do for a few minutes. It was almost like they were playing a game, and then they'd lose interest, and maybe 15 minutes later it would start up again. I would definitely not describe that as the type of violent act that would provoke a gas attack from the United States troops. So I was over in the southwest part of the protest in Chapman Square. I'd say maybe 11 o'clock perhaps, and I was just posting about how Orwellian it seemed to have a remote control camera taking a picture of the crowd. But in any case, I was sitting up with my back against a bench, kind of typing away, and I could hear in the background some of what I would consider to be kind of the professional protesters. And what I mean by professional protesters is, really the protesters consisted of maybe three groups of four groups of people. There was the vast majority were people like myself, just there to express our outrage at federal troops attacking peaceful protesters in Portland, Oregon. And of the 5,000 to 7,000 people that I would estimate were there, that was probably 4,000 or something of the people. I guess there's maybe four groups because Portland is a huge homeless crisis, and the organizers of these protests had set up kind of a barbecue, and were feeding people, and I think that attracted some of the homeless people there here in Oregon. So in addition to kind of the waspy white guys and women, ladies like myself, there was also the moms dressed in yellow, and there were perhaps several hundred, perhaps 300 to 500 women dressed in yellow, I would guess. And then there were the professional protesters that I mentioned before. And I think that the professional protesters, I get the sense that a good way of thinking about them is like what I like to do once a week, which is, in normal times, go play basketball. And I just get a kick out of playing basketball, and it's clear that here in Portland we have some people that just get a kick out of protesting, and they're all dressed in black, so you can't see who they are, and they seem to be very sophisticated and giving out advice to people. I think they were the ones that about maybe an hour before we were attacked by the federal troops, they were the ones that brought out big jugs of water. So there were jugs of water all over the place. I can actually show you a picture of the jug of water in case you somehow don't believe it. But this is a jug of water that those professional protesters brought out there. And the jugs of water are for when you get tear gassed. You can use the water to wipe the tear gas out of your eyes, I understand. my tear gassing, I was quite far away, so although it really stung and caused my eyes to tear up, it was quite painful. I can only imagine what it would be like if you were next to one of those tear gas canisters when it exploded. It would be incredibly painful, I would think. Thankfully, I did not experience that, though I did experience tear gas from a distance of maybe 20 or 30 yards. So I was sitting there posting away about this Orwellian camera on the Multnomah Justice Center when I could hear fairly close to me 3 of these professional protesters, per se, discussing tactics. Tactics that you should use in response to being tear gassed, and they were talking about how to pick up the tear gas or put something over it, or whatever, and it seems so surreal to me, because as I looked around, the only thing that was happening was people were chanting Black Lives Matter and George Floyd and feds out of Portland and a few other things, but they were all exceedingly reasonable, I felt, to chant, and certainly well within our bounds, the rights afforded to us in the United States Constitution to be chanting these things. But yet these 3 guys are talking about what to do when we get tear gassed. And so, interestingly, one of the guys, I overheard him, had a heavy British accent, and he was, they were arguing about what they should do when we got tear gassed, and he was saying, I used to be British Special Forces, and I was in, I think he said, Libya or something. He's like, when I was positioned in Libya, this is what we did, and it was just bizarre. I've been in protests before. We stand next to a street, we raise a sign. I protested the first Iraq War, and it seems so different from last night. First of all, usually we're just on a roadside protesting as cars go past. Last night we were all kind of gathered, huddled together, thousands and thousands of people huddled together in Chapman Square and Lanson's Park, just outside of the federal courthouse. And the proposition that we were about to get gassed just didn't make any sense to me. So as literally moments later, after having these thoughts, I hear these 3 guys start going, "Feds, feds, feds," and then the whole crowd, thousands of people, start chanting "Feds, feds, feds," and I peeked up from my typing away, and coming north on 3rd Avenue, and I've got this correct. I know Gavin might have filmed an earlier testimonial today, and I might have given the street wrong, but it was 3rd Avenue coming northbound, and on 3rd Avenue there were, I would estimate 18 federal agents, and dressed in battle fatigues, and I was too far to see the machine guns, but I assume they had machine guns, having read the news and so forth. And they were coming north. They were coming at us, and I stood up and I looked at them for a second. I'm like, oh, I better quickly finish up this post, right? So I start typing frantically, and all of a sudden, somebody taps me on the shoulder, and he goes, "Dude, or sir," I think he said, "Sir, you better stand up and get your head up." And I was like, this is crazy. Like, we've done absolutely nothing illegal. We've done absolutely nothing illegal. I was there the whole time. It's a small park. I can see, like, if there was any damage occurred that was occurring, I would have seen it. And yet, here's somebody telling me, you better stand up. You need to protect yourself against against these federal troops who were about to attack us. And so I obliged, and I swear within 2 or 3 seconds, boom, 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 boom. It felt like we were in Kandahar. I mean, this is insane. This is the United States. This is our precious Beaverton, or Portland, Oregon. This is a beautiful city that we all love, and we're being attacked by federal troops in our own city. It was crazy. It was insane. We had done nothing, absolutely nothing to deserve this. So, I can tell you that in these situations, we quickly figure out whether we instinctively fight or flight. And I'll tell you, I fall very much into the flight category. I wanted to get the hell out of there, right? Everything was telling me to get out. And so, I'm not even, I'll have to check, but I'm not even sure I took a picture of these shock troops coming at us and shooting us. But the boom, boom, booms were coming from all directions. It was a little unclear to me what direction safe flight would take. And so I did what made sense to me, which was to go to the middle of the crowd. So I went over to Main Street, which is right in the center of everything. And I noticed that the crowd had spilled out to the west on Main Street to some extent. And I had this, it brought up a recollection from a scene that I had seen as a child in a fantastic movie called Kunta Kinte, I think. And in that movie, the father had asked the son a question, and then the son had said, well, we complete the enclosure and then we kill them all. The father was a warrior, and they were talking about battle tactics, right? And that thought sprung to mind right then, because Main Street was open. North to Salmon and 4th Avenue and 3rd Avenue to the north, there was boom, 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 boom. And to the south, where I had come from, because I was in Chapman Square on Madison, it was boom, 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 boom. And there, the tear gas was causing your eyes to tear up. And so, like the rest of the crowd, I spilled to the west, because the police had not entirely enclosed the park. Instead, they left the west entrance free, allowing us protesters to escape to the west. And so I went for it. I started, slowly looking around and heading to the west as we're under attack by U.S. federal troops. And I went to the west, and I walked west on Main Street. It happened to be that that's where I was parked, and so I thought this is propitious that would be the direction that would be open for escape. And so I escaped, and I soon noticed how brave everyone else was. Because although the crowd had spilled to the west, everybody else stopped, and I had kept going, and so I was alone, and that made me twice as scared, or 10 times as scared. It was very scary. I'll tell you, it was very scary. You don't want troops with machine guns attacking you. And I got to my car, and I put the sign away, and I had in my car, I had under the advice of my older son Shane, I brought some goggles and a helmet, bicycle helmet, somehow appropriate if you're a clump to bring a bicycle helmet. So I put on the goggles and the helmet, and earlier I had the thought, like, I'm not leaving here until all the moms are safe, right? Of course I did. I was scared. I think the thing that made me put on the helmet and head back in was to protect the moms in yellow shirts. So I did. And I went back into the melee. I guess maybe the other thing that gave me courage was really the incoming, what sounded like mortars only lasted maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and then it had stopped by the time I got to my car. So I put on my helmet, my goggles, and I headed back to the park. I'm not sure I was thinking about the mom so much at the time. Maybe I was just thinking, like, well, it's stopped. I need to continue to bear witness to this crime that I'm witnessing, that I am witnessing, of federal troops attacking innocent, peaceful protesters exercising their First Amendment rights under the Constitution of the United States, which I really and truly believe that the orange devil in the White House does not believe in. He does not believe in this. Otherwise, there would be no federal troops sent down to protect a city in which the protests had I guess not completely, but almost completely melted away. There was really nobody protesting here in Portland. I can show you the pictures, the graffiti from the walls, if that there was, I think, had largely been removed. Most of the boarding was gone. The city was on the mend. Our city was on the mend, and yet that orange-haired devil came out for political purposes and caused people like me, 57-year-old peacenik from Beaverton, to have to go down to Portland so he could gas us for a political stunt. Which I did, and I hope to be able to do again. And I stayed at the protests for maybe another 45 minutes to an hour. I glanced down. It was about 12:15 when I left, and to be honest, I think I left for a few reasons, at least 2 reasons. First off, there was something about this scene where the organizers, I think maybe you could describe them as the professional organizers, had organized the remaining, I think maybe the remaining moms behind a barricade, and they were moving the moms up to the front lines, and they knew exactly where the front lines were. I had no idea, but it was clearly going to be on Main Street, which bisects the Multnomah Justice Center and the U.S. District Courthouse. That's, I guess, where the next federal attack was going to come from. These people, these professional protesters knew this. You could kind of tell, and we all knew that the period we were experiencing between, say, 11:30 and whenever was just the calm before the storm. We all knew we were going to get gassed again. It was just implicit in the kind of this group knowledge. We were chanting and waiting to get gassed again. And as the professional organizers moved these beautiful, powerful moms into the front lines to protect the rest of us, hoping that these federal troops sent by this crazy person that's in charge of our country, as they move them to the front lines to protect the rest of us, I thought, first of all, there's only maybe 50 or 60 of them left. Most of these moms have left. They're wise, right? We know these moms are wise. If you look at countries that are being led by women right now, they're doing far better in the coronavirus than the countries led by men, right? So I don't know, maybe there was some wisdom in them, in many of them having left, or maybe they were taking turns each night on who would stay and who would go home, who would stay and be on the very front lines. In any case, I saw them, and that just didn't feel right to me. But the other thing that didn't feel right to me is the nature of these protests that we have in Oregon. For some reason, I have no idea why, we seem to have a bit of a culture of endless protests here. And I have been frustrated, and I continue to be frustrated, and I certainly can bear witness to this last night, that there was no Martin Luther King leader in the leadership of these protests who is standing atop, maybe something and listing a set of demands that could be written down and presented to the Portland leadership and the Portland Police Department, a set of demands that would be actionable by the police department. If we're just going to go down there and protest Black Lives Matter, I don't see that as actionable from the perspective of the police department. The police department needs to know, here's what we can do to meet your demands. And I would say that demands obviously should go well beyond the police department here in Portland, Oregon, and in the United States, and I suspect around the world. The demands should include things like Adidas, that only has maybe 1% black people working within the company here in the Portland office, needs to have a representative number of minorities. It's absolutely unacceptable that they're so underrepresented in some of our major businesses here. And I think that part of the demands that the leadership of the Portland protests need to present to the city would include quantifiable measurements that need to be achieved in the next, say, year or two. So maybe if Adidas has 1% people of color, maybe that needs to go to 2% and then 3% in the next year or two. Whatever, it needs to be actionable and measurable and presentable to Portland so that we can stop having these endless protests. I know I love playing basketball every week and going down to the gym. I look forward to it. And unfortunately, what we seem to have here in Portland is these professional protesters who get the same kind of kick out of being tear gassed and organizing a response to being tear gassed, and we don't need that. Black people don't need that. Portland doesn't need that. What we need is somebody to step up and write down a set of demands, and then to negotiate with the city and be willing to compromise so that we can stop this endless protests. Because it's, obviously it's given Trump a chance to launch a provocation here, and what we really need here is social justice. And again, my name is Andy Klump. I'm 57 years old. I was at the peaceful protests last night until 12:15. They remained peaceful the entire time I was there. We were attacked in an unprovoked manner by what I understand to be federal troops. I don't think there were any Portland police that participated in the attack, although I'm kind of going on the word of the professional protesters who seem to know exactly what was going on. And everything that I've related today, right now, is true and factual. I swear.